Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3, on page 1405. Speaking about two levels of souls, of the soul, I should say. The soul as it is manifests in the body in this reality, in the below, and the root of the soul. And depending on that is whether the soul is higher than Torah or the Torah is higher than the souls. And so that reconciles the different places we find, sometimes that the Torah is higher, and sometimes the souls are higher. So we talk about the soul below, that manifests inside of a body and gets concealed, and it's also a diminished level of the soul, the nefesh, or the ruach and the neshama. So then Torah, which is revealed divinity, revealed godliness, God's wisdom, God's will, is a higher level. And actually the souls need the Torah to illuminate. What would we be like? Even though we have a soul in this world, we wouldn't have the light and guidance and direction how to live our lives. The souls above, they have a spiritual clarity because they're not encumbered and they're not concealed within a body. But look at ourselves. We have a soul, and yet to be aware of your soul takes a lot of work. And more importantly, even if you're aware of your soul, how to live your life, you need the guidance of the Torah. So the Torah becomes the kesher, that there's the mamutza, the interface between us and godliness. Not that the soul is not a godly soul, but it requires that siyua, that support. Like the eyes need light to see. And that's the state that's the beginning state. So when a person learns Torah on that level, they're learning Torah as we learn, that the beginning when a person serves, he serves in order to connect himself, to connect his soul to God. So when he's learning Torah, it's not for the Torah, it's not for higher purposes, for us to be able to know what to do, for us to connect. But then has to come Torah Lishma. Another level is learning Torah, not then Adaita de Nafshe, which is for your nefesh, for you and for your needs. It's a power, it's a holy need, but it's still your need, but it's learning Lishma. And here he said that the Torah comes down, manifests itself in physical matters. There's the Torah, how it discusses the spiritual dimension of the physical. Like the physical, he gave the examples for exchanging a cow for a donkey, two people holding on to a talus, a garment, four different properties of Shabbos, private property, public property, and so on. And then there's the way the Torah speaks about these matters on a spiritual level. That's Lamaila. And we have to connect the Torah as it is below to the Torah as it is above. In other words, even though the Torah is giving us guidance, the neshama, how to live our lives, what's a reshus hayachid on Shabbos, what are you supposed, where could you carry, where could you not carry, and so on. But the next step is that you learn Torah Lishma to connect the Torah as it addresses our lives down below to the spiritual dimensions of Toyu and Tikkun and whatever the different laws of Torah relate to. But then he said, Omnam yesh leimer Lishma. However, we can say Lishma is even deeper. It's connecting Torah to Ein Sof, to Eir Ein Sof. The Shema Torah, that even the Torah above. So it's one thing is connecting the Torah as it relates to the material world, to the Torah as it speaks about the spiritual archetypes, the corresponding spiritual levels to the physical halachas, the physical laws of the Torah. Then there's even more so, Lamhamshich Eir Ein Sof, that's higher than Torah, even the Torah as it is in Atzilus or in the Lamaila, in the higher worlds, like it says by David HaMelech, that he connected the Torah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means we're revealing in Torah and connecting Torah to even a higher level than the Torah itself has on a revealed level. And that's what the neshamas can do. Why? Because now we're talking about the neshamas that are rooted higher than Torah. So in the early stages, it's like saying, just to give a simple example, in the beginning, when a teacher teaches the students, we call beginner students, So the students are the primary recipients, and the teacher is the primary giver. Even though I'm sure he learns something from them, but it's still 5-year-olds, they're receiving, and the teacher is giving. But as the student grows, what happens? The student's mind gets sharper, more mature, expands, and the student can now talk to the teacher and sometimes add something that the teacher didn't even know. Challenge the teacher to the point that the student can even surpass the teacher. So the Torah initially, we learn Torah, so Torah teaches us. But there's some point where we can teach the Torah something, so to speak. What does that mean? That because the neshamas are rooted in a higher level, so they're mashpia in the Torah. And to explain that, the Rebbe Rashab now is quoting this famous Zohar in Truma, Pasha Truma. And he dissects every expression here. So it says the Zohar following. That when God created the world, he looked into the Torah and Toraisa, and that's how he created the world. So the world's creation is like a structure, a building, built by the blueprint called the Torah. And the Zohar continues, Bar Nash, so to a human being, we look in the Torah v'koyem alma, and we sustain the world, and we preserve the world. We could say even elevate the world. In other words, God created the world with the Torah, and we transform the world with Torah. I don't want to say the word transform because koyim really means to establish it. So we make the world aligned with the Torah that God created, because the world is on its own in a dark state. So even though the very physical world was created by God in a perfect way, but then Adam and Chava, man and woman, and all human beings ever since, our job is to make sure the world is aligned, and everything that happens in this world should be aligned with the Torah. So koyim alma, we sustain, we establish, we preserve the world. That's the Zohar. Now, what's the explanation of it? So we have here a few things. We have the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's God, the level of Kudsha Brichu. We have the level of Torah that he uses to create the world. Then we have the person, the human being, the neshamas that come into the world, and they look into Torah as well, and they sustain the world. So these are several things going on. There's God, there's the Torah, and there's the Bar Nash, the human being, the soul. So here's how he explains the Zohar. We learned this yesterday, but I'll go over it again now. So he says like this. The level of Araisa is the level of Adam Kadmon. Torah is the blueprint for existence. And that in the worlds, that's the level of Adam Kadmon. Because we learned before, Torah is rooted in Machshava Gduma of Ak. The Chochma Gduma of Ak. Right. So what is Ak? He says is an Er Klali. It's like a snapshot of all of existence. It encompasses everything from the highest levels to the lowest level, like a blueprint. Like a blueprint of a structure, the blueprint can be something that's just the size of a small size. It could be on your table. It's nothing close to the magnitude and the size of the entire structure. But as the blueprint has everything there in microcosm, in all the details, and with that blueprint, you create, the architect builds, the contractor builds the world according to this blueprint. So the same thing here. So Ak is that includes everything, all the worlds. And that's what it means, and it says, so everything is included in Machshava Gduma da Ak, in that primordial thought, in that one snapshot thought of Ak. Everything beskira achas, with one glance, with one picture, one snapshot. And that's what the Zohar says, but Machshava achas, with one thought, all the worlds were created. What's that one thought? One thought, Machshava Gduma. It's not just a single thought. It means a one all-encompassing thought. Okay. And everything there is a Machshava achas, because it's one snapshot, it's one picture. It's like looking at something from a bird's eye view, and you see the whole landscape, not just a piece of it. And that turns Ak into a mamutza. It's an interface between Eir and Sof, which is higher than the blueprint, and the worlds. That's what the blueprint is. It's an interface. Because on one hand, it's already a snapshot of existence. On the other hand, it's only a snapshot. It's not the actual worlds, because the worlds themselves are in a state of structure. When you're on the ground, you know bird's eye, piece by piece, what he calls b'chinas zman, past, present, future, yesterday, today, tomorrow. Eir Ein Sof is higher than zman. Sa'ak, which is completely beyond time. Sa'ak, which called Sefer Mabit, is able to glance and see everything from beginning of time till the end of time, at Seif Kol HaDeiros, and everything in one snapshot. That's the interface between beyond time of Eir Ein Sof and the time structure of actual structural time in this world. And now goes back, let's go now back to the Zohar, he says. And that's the inyan of Istakel Baraisa or Bara Alma. That Torah is like the same thing as the klal. I'm sorry, the Torah breaks down into two parts, klal and prat. He gam came between klal and prat. The klalos of the Torah, the snapshot, the Torah as it is encompasses the whole picture. That's like the klali of Adam Kadmon. Kutsha Brichu, the one that's looking into the Torah, which means actually the architect that wrote the blueprint in the first place. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then he's looking into it. That's Atzmis Eir Ein Sof, Pnimius Ak. That's higher than Ak, the blueprint, or Torah as it encompasses everything. It's even higher than the klali, the all-encompassing snapshot or picture of existence. So this level of Kutshe Brichu, which is the higher, the Eir Ein Sof, like Istakel Baraisa, looks into the Torah. So Primius Ak is looking into Chetzenius Ak, or let's call it not Chetzenius, the Ak, that is the klali, the snapshot. Primius Ak, Kutshe Brichu is looking into the Torah. That means that in order to create the worlds from a state of Atzmus Eir Ein Sof that's beyond time, he needs to look into the Torah. Now, we don't know, God doesn't need to do it, but he wants to do it. That's how he created something, so we can relate to it. So, of course, God didn't need a blueprint. He could have just created the world and that's it. But he wanted a document. He wanted something that would capture his picture, create the world with that, and then we can look at the text. So in order to create the world from Atmos, first you need the general picture, the general snapshot. And then afterwards it comes down into details as you actually build the structure detail by detail, time and space in their detailed structure. So there's Maimah Kloli, Maimah Prati, Maimah Sosa, Maimah Pesuach. Now, what about the second half of the statement of the Zohar? Now comes the next half. That's the way the creation happens. Now, what happens through our avodah, our work? Barnash mistakel baraisa v'koyim alma. Actually, we went all the way to the top of 1406. I started 1405. Yep. Okay. So now the human being, the neshama, looks into the Torah and sustains the world. Why? Because Yisrael, Olav Machshava, because Yisrael is rooted in the Machshava that's higher than the klali, which is the level of Pnimiusak. It's rooted in the level of Kutshe Brichu in the language of the Zohar. So Barnash has something that comes from that level, like he calls Olu b'machshava. They arose in machshava means Olu, a higher level in thought. The b'chinas machshava klumdag malu madrege elyena yeser. Behind the b'chinas Pnimiusak. So now when Barnash, when the person, the soul, comes and looks into the Torah, top of 1406. And that's why they have the power to draw from Atzmis Eir Ein Sof. That's higher than Torah, because Torah, we learned, is the level of Ak, of the klali of Ak, the snapshot, the picture. And that's what the neshamas do. And that's why they sustain the world, even more than just the creation. Now you could ask the question, what do you need the people for? God already did that. Kutshe Brichu looked into Torah and he created the world. Because you want not just to recreate the world, you want to sustain the world. You want to elevate it. And you need, who can elevate it? You need someone to go back to that level of Pnimiusak. What he's calling Pnimiusak, Kutshe Brichu. So just as God looked into the Torah to create the world, we look into the Torah This is the higher level. The earlier level, we look to the Torah for guidance. The Torah tells us what to do and what not to do. That was a daita de nafshe, the lower level. But now we're talking about connecting Ein Sof to Torah, we go back to the Creator. We're not just looking at the blueprint, which is Torah. It's God's Torah. But we're able to go back to where the God looks at the Torah. Just as God looked at the Torah, we look into the Torah, and we're able to draw from that higher level, which you need in order to transform the world. The Torah has the power to create the world, but the neshamas have the power to transform the world. And to transform the world, they also need Torah. However, here we're talking about drawing down from the level of Pnimiyasak into Torah. So you have both levels here. How Torah guides us and how we draw down higher levels into the Torah. And in doing so, we're able to koyim alma to and like I said, a good example would be the teacher. First, you're a young student and you're receiving. As the student grows older and matures and becomes fully functional, the student now could be mashpia, even to the teacher and even to the world. First, the student has to learn and receive, and then it can be that mashpia that we're talking about here. All right. So to put it a little even more, spell it out even more. When Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden and were created and placed in the Garden of Eden, la'avda l'shamra, to serve and protect. Now, what was the world like before they came there? It was considered elam al miluye nivra. Elah told us, it was a perfect world. God created a beautiful world. It says toiv. Every day, except on Monday, says it's good. And on Tuesday, it says double good. So the world was a good world. It was a perfect world. It was a gan. It was a garden, and it was gani. It was God's garden, because the Shekhinah was there. So what did Adam and Chava come to add? It was the first time they were created, was the first Rosh Hashanah. What did they do? It says, they honor and glorify God our King. What they added was, the world was perfect world, but it cannot go higher. It didn't go lower either. So on a simple example, when it says, when a wicked person walks on the cobblestones on the street, the cobblestones cry out, "What right do you have to walk on me? I never transgressed. I never went against God." When a tzaddik walks on cobblestones, they thank him, like the stones that argued where Yaakov's head should rest. Why? Because the tzaddik said, elevate as is, the world of mineral, vegetable, vegetation, and the world of animal, on its own go against God, they don't go for God, which means that they're God's creation. They're the art that God created. The human being has the capacity, unfortunately, to cause damage, but the main point is we're created to elevate the world, to be adira b'tachtenim, even more than what the creation was initially. When we, in our Aveda, we bring godliness, you take an apple off a tree, and you make a blessing on it, and then you use the energy to do a mitzvah, you've elevated the apple higher than the apple that was created. How do we how to use this world as God wants? But it's more than just following the Torah. We follow the guidance and light of Torah, like the eyes that see with the light of Torah. But then we have something more that we add, because the neshamas are rooted even higher than Torah. As we grow, we come to a point where we can transmit into Torah higher levels of godly awareness and consciousness, and in turn, not just follow the Torah, but also transform the world
You're quite frozen. Absimin, you're frozen. It says you have low bandwidth. I don't know. Everybody.
Did you guys lose me for a minute? Are you able to hear me?
A long minute.
We can hear you.
What was it was choppy till now? Was it good till now?
No, we couldn't hear you at all.
Yeah, just everything went off. Everything got, and you froze, and at least a minute.
But before that, was it?
Before that, it was okay. Yeah, it was okay.
So where did I? What was the last thing you heard me say?
It said you had low. I mean, I don't know. It said.
What was the last thing I said in Ayin Beis?
About Torah being beautiful, I think.
Oh, really? After you didn't. So the world was beautiful.
That was it. Yep, that's all I heard. After that, nothing.
Okay, so I'll repeat and review over that piece.
Low bandwidth.
That's what it says now?
That's what it said before. And yesterday it said the same thing.
Yeah. So the last piece you heard was I said a beautiful world that God created. Okay. Did you hear the piece I said about when wicked people walk on the stones cry out, "What right do you have to walk on me?"
Yes.
Yes.
But then shortly after that, you said something which mentioned beautiful, I believe, or Torah.
Okay.
Sorry.
What I was saying was like this. I'll just add more to it. There's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin that asks the question, why did God create the human being last? Since the human being is the central purpose of existence, why was the human being created at the end? And the Mishnah gives two reasons. One is because when you set the table and you invite a special guest, first you set the table, then you invite the guest. You don't sit the guest down and then set the table. So God first set the table, which is the world, and then the guest comes, which is the human being, with the power to partake in this meal, and more than that, transform the world and make it more than just beautiful, make it extraordinary, which is making this world into a divine home, essentially bringing Mashiach, if you wish. The second reason the Mishnah gives is because when a human being sins, he's told, don't think you're so special. You were created even after all you created last. Even the yitush, even an insect, a mosquito was created before you. So the obvious question is very different answers. One is that special guest, and one is that we're inferior even to an insect. So the answer is depends how you behave. We have the capacity to elevate the world beyond its own parameters, to bring Ein Sof, the infinite, divine, into a finite world. But we also have the capacity with our free will to do the opposite, to bring the world down and destroy the world and bring destruction. So it depends on how we behave. So the neshama, initially, we need the Torah, because without Torah, we don't have a light, we don't have a guiding light of how to live our lives. But ultimately, we reach a level where the neshama is higher than Torah, and is drawing down Ein Sof that's even higher than the Torah, as it serves as a blueprint for creation. So the blueprint for creation created a beautiful world. God looked into the Torah, and with that, he created the world. When we look into the Torah, we sustain and elevate the world even higher than it was initially. More or less what I said before, but I just decided to sum it up again, different words, in case anything was missed.
Sorry, but you're frozen again.
Can you see and hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on my end. Big problems here. I don't know. My internet is very. Okay, let's continue. Let's see if it works. You all there?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Out of my control here. Start the recording again. Okay. So I also said that I would refer you to what we learned in volume 1. I want to refer to the pages where we actually discussed some of these ideas. I just want to make note of that. Yeah. That was a repeat from the YouTube. Okay. So I want to refer you, if you don't mind, give me a minute. Where was it? Oh, later. Give me a moment. I'm just looking up in volume 1 where we learned these ideas before. Yeah. So first of all, regarding Atik was discussed on 168. Yeah. Basically, from chapters 167 and on was discussion of these things that we're learning here. I'm going to go through it more in detail and I'll come back to you, but I just wanted to state it for the record. Yeah, Kimi Kodakov it was chapter 177. Fine, we'll look at it. Okay, action is, yeah. So we continue now. So just give me one moment. So continuing along page 1406, second line, and the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. She says like this now. Va'inyanhu. So remember now, neshamas nash draw down from atzmis and sof that's higher than Torah as it's an klali. He's going to explain this now, what that means. Va'inyanhu dehine be'etz chayim in Eitz Chaim from the Arizal Shar Memal of Gimel, Gate 41, chapter 3, says like this: Sheyesh nitzutz kotten ma'od. You may be familiar with this idea, but if not, I'll explain it. There's a small, very small spark. Nitzutz kotten ma'od. Very small spark. Shehu b'chinas elikus. That's a level of a divine level, godliness. Nimshech mimadrega achreina shebebeira. That this small spark, which is godly, is drawn, originates, it comes from Nimshach, extends from the lowest level of the Beira, Sheba Beira, in the creator. Now we know there's no levels in the creator, so it's all figuratively speaking, meaning it's not the entire creator. Like when you talk about pantheism, for example, that God is nature and nature is God. No, God is nature, but nature is not God. So existence, but he's calling here is a small spark, this very small spark comes from the so-called the lowest level of the Beira, meaning not the entire creator. It's like the creator has much in him, and one speck of that turns into this small spark, which is a divine spark. V'zeh nitzutz, and this spark, in turn, mistabeshes, it manifests and gets enclosed. B'koyach nitzutz echad, the power of one spark, nivra, of the creation. So there's the Beira, the creator, from him emanates a energy that is called a nitzutz echad, a divine spark, and that manifests in a koyach, is the power of a spark, nivra, which is called nivra, creation. And the Rebbe Rashab adds, yesh leimer, we can say this means k'moy she'ak nikra adam de bria. So we know that Ak is called Adam de Bria, meaning the man of Bria, meaning the structure of Bria, but Ak is also a divine reality. We said before it's a kloli. So when he says Nivra, it means, relatively speaking, to the divine that's beyond creation, this is called creation. So again, you have a small, from the lowest level of the creator comes a small spark that is divine, which in turn manifests in a spark that's called Nivra, a nitzutz echad Nivra, and he compares that to Ak. And what is this small spark, the Nivra? Shehi neshama daka b'ma'od. This is a very refined, a very subtle, and sublime soul, Hanikra Yechida. This is called Yechida. So when we talk about Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, this is the definition of Yechida. Is the highest level of the soul in its purest form. And what is that? That's a nitzutz echad nivra. That's a spark, a created spark that manifests the creator. And this spark, that's called Yechida, it contains the root of four levels, which is Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. Atkan l'shene. That's the exact language that he just cited from Eitz Chaim. So let's go over it again. It's very fundamental. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe brings it in a footnote in Basiligani in the first chapters of Tafshin Yud, this Eitz Chaim. So when we say Nekudas Hayadus, or Nekuda Pintala, the Pintala Yid, or the Pintala Neshama, what does that mean, Pintala? It's not just an expression, it's coming from Eitz Chaim. It's a very tiny spark. Tiny meaning here, not small in a negative way, but subtle, extremely sublime, is Yechida Shebenefesh within us, which is rooted in that's a nitzutz echad nivra, that is, manifests within it. The nitzutz echad beira, what he calls the nitzutz echad, nitzutz katan ma'od, that's the lakus, which comes from the lowest level of the Beira, and the significance of it. I always use the example of the artist and the art. So if in this case the world existence is the art that God created. He created a beautiful architecture, but it's like a beautiful painting, but more than a painting that you look at, this is life. It's a living painting. It's a living work of art, a living structure called the cosmic order. Seder Ishtalshus, the whole existence. So you have here two things: God, the creator, and the creation, the artist and the art, the author and the book, the architect and the building. They're all good examples for this, for the purpose we're discussing now. And these examples are actually used in Medrash when we say that the Torah is the blueprint for existence. It says, because God is like the cosmic architect, the blueprint is the Torah, and creation is the product, is the structure, the building. Okay. Like we're going to be learning in the coming parshas. The Torah tells us, God tells Moshe how to build the Mishkan. So the Torah is like the blueprint of what the Mishkan should look like. And then you have to actually build it accordingly. Now, all this is good, is a creator and a creation, an artist or an architect and a building. But there's a purpose. He didn't just put it there to create beautiful art. God wants that now this world should be transformed and become a permanent dira lo yizbarach b'tachtenu, a home for the divine. So he created a world that on its own conceals the divine. It may not go against the divine, but it conceals the divine to the point that the concealment, like the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 36 in Tanya, can become a force that opposes godliness, a state where there's a feeling of aniva afsied, me and nothing else. And then he sends a piece of himself, so to speak, a spark that originates in the divine, enters into existence. And this is called the neshama. So the neshama, even though it manifests and will enter into this world of creation, into this building, and it's also part of the building, because we're also created by God. We also have a structure, but we have something more. The Torah tells us that the human being has something unique. We were created in the divine image. What's the difference between being created in the divine image and all the art that God created? The art is a product of God's. And yes, it reflects elements of godliness, but it's not created in the divine image. It doesn't capture the divine personality that a neshama has. The unique personality, the Rambam calls it free will, the intelligence we have, the ability not just to live out our lives like
You've been
every
frozen
animal
for
or flower.
you were frozen for 30 seconds.
Looks like Albert Jacobson has internet problem. He said he's going to resume on Sunday.
Oh, he texted you and said that. Okay. Okay, now tell you can teach this year.
Tzvi, from your questions by the share, I have no problem if you're going to be teaching because I think you know the stuff.
I don't, but thank you for the compliment. So you teach it in the meantime.
No, I'm not a liar. I don't compliment. I'm telling you the fact the way they are, Tzvi. I respect you for that. Reb Shloime, I see, is still here. Harav Tachtel, can you share something with us? Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. I guess there's nobody near the level of Reb Simmons. So what are you gonna do? Anyway, everybody have a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll see you Mitzvah on Sunday. Be well.
Shabbos, good Shabbos.